What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, August 6th, 2018, start of a brand new week. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in with your comments and questions. A reminder that this Wednesday, our guest will be Alan Phillips. He's a vaccine attorney who is now being sued by the State Bar Association. Apparently for his vaccine activism. We'll be talking to him. Now, today is the 73rd anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. They dropped Little Boy, the uranium bomb, and it killed roughly between 1/3 and 2/3 of the population of 350,000. And of course, later in the week, there will be the dark anniversary of the bombing of Nagasaki. And the real tragedy for that is Japan was already trying to surrender. When Russia came on in the war against Japan, Japan knew it was finished, and they were trying to surrender. Truman dropped the two bombs, first of all, to prove to the world we really had them, and had the political will to use them. So, with all this talk about Iran's nukes and Iraq's nukes and Syria's nukes and Cuba's nukes and whoever all else, it is worth remembering that the only nation that has ever actually used nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of another country is the United States. Now, big news over the weekend is there appears to have been an assassination attempt on Venezuelan President Maduro. He was out there giving a speech, and there were a couple of loud detonations, and of course the security detail got in front of him with their little bulletproof shields and everything. Venezuela is saying they've arrested 6 people already, and they're accusing far-right extremists both in Venezuela and in Colombia and even in Florida of involvement in this. Now, John Bolton is already out there saying we had nothing to do with it. We dare you to prove that we had anything to do with this. There's no shred of evidence that we had anything to do with it. And originally, the media tried to downplay this, saying it hadn't actually been an assassination attempt, but a gas explosion, quoting anonymous firefighters, which is amazing how any corporate media would have the phone number of firefighters down in Venezuela. But there is a school of thought that this might have been a stunt to distract the Venezuelan people from all the terrible things going on down there. But it's no secret the U.S. has been trying to regime change the place going back decades. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility that somebody in the U.S. decided to speed up that regime change process just a little tiny bit, and if so, clearly they bungled it. Now, interestingly enough, the former president of Colombia, Alvaro Uribe, from office, and I find the timing very suspicious, and it tends to make it look like this was a legitimate attempt on Maduro's life here. All right, getting into the other conflict zones that we have around the world, and boy, there are so many. I mean, if Bernie Sanders is right, the U.S. is militarily engaged in 76 countries around the world. And it just does seem like we're lining up for that century of perpetual endless war that the Project for the New American Century was calling for here. Anyway, the Syrian army, having pretty much cleaned out the southern part of Syria, they're now preparing for an operation in northern Latakia. And apparently the head of the Syrian Scientific Studies and Research Center died when an IED hit his car. And they're saying it appears to be another assassination, and there are a lot of them going on in the area. Now, of course, the Western media is trying to say that this scientist was working on chemical weapons, which of course Syria says no, he was actually a missile expert. But have you noticed that about the media? No matter what the headline, they're going to stick, chemical weapons, or it's just nothing but spin. It's constant spin. And sometimes the spin gets so out of control, the headline will be completely opposite from what's in the body of the article. You'll read the headline, you'll get one thought, and then if you read the actual article, oh, well, this says something completely different. But corporate media, at least the newspapers, they're counting on you just to read the headlines. You scan through the newspaper, you get the headlines, you get the propaganda. They put the more accurate story down below so that nobody can accuse them of flat out lying. Oh, we just got reckless with the headline. That's all it is. Okay, so we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. Interestingly enough, China is offering to step on in to Syria. Now, they've been providing political support, and they're looking forward to basically coming into the post-war reconstruction. Russia and China are going to get all those contracts and all that money. The U.S. lost this one here. But China's ambassador to Syria, Qi Qingjin, has suggested Beijing might soon deploy military forces to assist the Syrian army in its upcoming offensive in Idlib, as well as anti-terrorist operations in other parts of the country. So that's getting interesting. All right. Now, down in the Golan, remember where Israel had set up a hospital which was known to be treating wounded al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, ISIS fighters to send them back into the fray. One more confirmation that it was all just one big gang. They are now taking that hospital apart because that part of the war definitely does seem to be over. Now then, over in Bulgaria, about a year ago, there was a reporter, Dilyana Gaitan Shiva, published a report in a Main Street outlet, Trud, in her home country, exposing the paper trail documenting the U.S., NATO, and Gulf countries were shipping weapons to terrorists in Syria. And her reporting was the result of her own travels to Syria, where she saw the documents firsthand, and then her subsequent follow-up investigations. Now, if you find this story on the main page of whatreallyhappened.com and follow it, there is a link that goes to her article, 350 Diplomatic Flights Carry Weapons for Terrorists, and probably worth a read before it gets taken down. Now, the Iranian Navy is holding drills in the Persian Gulf. They're still dropping hints that they could close the Strait of Hormuz if push comes to talk. And it does seem like a crisis is building there. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls. Andy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Overall, we've got this Donald Trump phenomenon, if you will. Let me ask you this. Why do you think he's so unempowered? How come? He's supposedly the leader of the free world, and yet we're getting so little done here.
I think it's just the fact that he's dealing with bureaucratic resistance. John F. Kennedy had the exact same problem. There were a lot of things Kennedy wanted to do, and he simply couldn't because the bureaucrats would not go along with him. And if Trump really wants to start being the president, he's got to start firing some highly placed people and put the fear of being fired into their subordinates.
Well, I also think that he needs to up his security. I mean, we should be seeing this guy come out at a press conference in Washington, D.C. with armed guards, for that matter, and then really go after the Federal Reserve and really go after all these corrupt people. I mean, we know that the elections are rigged. We know they're rigged in some manner, shape, or form. I remember watching something about Ron Paul, the black box thing that was going on, and Rand Paul, 5 out of 10 people voted for Rand Paul, but 9 people got the other guy's vote. So, I mean, we got to do something. We're in a terrible disarray of I guess, democracy. I want it to be a republic where it's the rule of law and not the rule of 51%. But, I mean, here we are sitting here. The one problem we got, here's a question for you. Has your enrollment listening to you, has your audience grown?
Yes.
Since Donald Trump, yes, has it?
Well, it peaked during the election season. It tends to go down a little bit during the summer months because people want to get out to the beach and everything. And as we head into the autumn, the numbers will go back up again.
Well, we noticed that one big outlet, the AJ outlet, we noticed that just grew phenomenally and his entire format changed. So does that send any kind of messages to the RBN network that just kind of stays the same and reports the real news?
Well, you're talking about Alex Jones. Right now, he's in the middle of this huge fight where the deep state have apparently decided to just, dogpile on him and try and shut him down. And, of course, it's a warning to all of us in the independent media that sooner or later they're going to get around to us as well if they can pull this off. And there are some new developments regarding how social media is behaving. There's now talk of regulation. There, of course, is the fact that the big corporate social media that's been practicing this anti-conservative censorship is losing users and revenues. So they're realizing this kind of activism comes with a price.
Do you think that's the reason why he's backtracking on a lot of stuff? Because I mean, we don't hear anything about Sandy Hook and the manner in which he actually covered it. And perhaps he never did say anybody died there, but he covered it very well. And all these different false flag events. I mean, there's plenty of evidence out there to prove that these events never happened. Do you have any inclination whatsoever why he's not standing on those, on the very truth of the story?
Well, in terms of Sandy Hook, right now he's in the middle of a lawsuit over that, and the judge may have issued a gag order. I imagine that Alex Jones' advisors are urging him to be very cautious and, not get on out there and expose himself to more risk because he's dealing with this huge lawsuit. He's dealing with the fact that he's being dumped by all the major social media. And I imagine right now he's probably very concerned for the very existence of InfoWars. Well,
yeah, and also he's had some threats on his family and whatnot. So, I mean, things are really kind of heating up here.
Yes.
My only hope is, I mean, so far we haven't really seen an entire block of, like TuneIn Radio is still carrying Alex Jones. Is carrying you guys. That's how I listen to you guys on TuneIn Radio.
Yep.
And I probably shouldn't have said that because that's probably the next avenue they'll take out. But I mean, there's a war on for everything, including your mind. And Alex has got a really good platform to get this rolling and stuff. I just think he's taken a few steps backwards. And I'm really disappointed in that. However, I'm proud for him that he's making a show for himself, and he can defend himself and define himself a little bit more. As far as things go, though, everybody out there listening, RBN is a place where you want your information from. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mike.
Thank you for the kind words here. And we all have to back up Alex Jones. And hopefully he will get a precedent set in this court that, in point of fact, asking questions about the official story of anything is not, in fact, libelous or defamatory. And again, I think the case law is in their favor. It's all going to come down to the presentation to the jury. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I didn't really want to talk about Alex Jones because I like him, but I just think sometimes he goes off on the wrong way, and it makes him look silly to the point where it makes everybody who's trying to tell people what's going on look crappy. You know what I mean? Like, I think he needs to not go off on the deep end. You know what I mean? Like, he goes crazy sometimes, and it just says some foolish stuff, and then he makes everybody else who's around him look stupid. You know? Like, I wish he would stay straight to the facts, and that's it. That's it. Not instead of trying to push something else out and make a you know how he curses, he goes crazy on. I can't. I don't agree with him doing that. I mean, I don't know if he's doing that for ratings, but you know, got to keep with the facts. You know, act presidential. You know, in a way, right? I mean, but Mike, I forgot to tell you. You know, Argentina was also like at the BRICS summit with Turkey.
Ah, yes.
So yeah. So I mean, that's, you know, I mean, you're talking like, I mean, there's a lot of countries. You know, they're not official members, but I mean, you know, I mean, Mike, do you realize, your listeners realize, we're sanctioning everybody in the world. Like, if they don't go along what we want, we're sanctioning everybody.
Yeah.
Do what we tell you, or you're going to. We're using the banks as an economic weapon instead of, along with firing missiles. But the banking system is being used as a weapon now.
Well, they're weaponizing everything. They're weaponizing our commerce. That's what the sanctions are. And in my view, what the U.S. is doing is isolating itself economically and politically from the rest of the world. And the rest of the world isn't going to sit there and you know, accept this idea of we have to do what the U.S. says, or they're going to economically punish us. They're learning how to get along without us. They're transforming the global economy with this big hole in it where the United States used to be.
I remember they had a video where the Republicans went to Russia, and then they said one thing over there, but they said something else over here. So some of it is for show, but some of it ain't. So I don't know what the percentage is, you know, but like, but I mean, this is a dangerous thing going on. I mean, this leads to world wars. You know, there's a lot of fracturing going on in the world right now.
Yes.
I mean, this is not good.
No.
You know, and
these are dark times, no question.
Yeah, they are dark times. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open, and getting on back to the news here. So, as you know, last week, the government of Australia came out with a claim that the United States was getting ready to attack Iran. That might even happen, you know, within a month. Iran was understandably upset about that. The U.S. is denying that, saying that no, if they have to invade Iran, it's going to be off in 2026, which I think is designed to get Iran to relax their guard. I don't think the U.S. is going to wait that long. But basically, there are, again, concerns that a U.S. invasion of Iran would plunge the entire region into war. It's already at a hair trigger. And a regional war could very easily become a world war. It does seem that we're heading that way. Now, at a recent Pentagon press briefing, Task and Purposes Jeff Shogol asked General Joseph Votel, former SOCOM commander and current chief of U.S. forces in the greater Middle East, if a new generation of children will grow up to have to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. And Votel said, yes, I understand we've been in Afghanistan a long time. We're back in Iraq for a second or third time. They're talking about infinite war, which was exactly the agenda being put forward by the Project for the New American Century, that actually envisioned 100 years of unending U.S. war against the rest of the world to bring them under control. And that sounds a lot like the Nazis' 1,000-year Reich. Big talk, didn't work out. Okay, so we're going to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And yes, we're standing in front of you with our hands out yet again. The postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer, anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call in with a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring monthly subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And we're going to go back to the phones here to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
All right. Well, I'm a little concerned today. I'm actually shaking to my core today. Free speech. I've warned and warned and warned that this was coming. Once they can take Alex Jones off the air, they're going to take everybody off the air.
Probably.
There's going to be, attacks on the left-wing media, MSNBC, MSN, all your left-wing media combines. They're going to be fake, of course. They're going to be staged. So that way they can shut up more Republicans or people on the right. There's also going to be a staged right-wing uprising. It's to shut independent media down, and it's to shut any type of dissenting comment down. My question is, how do we fight this?
Well, first of all, you need to remember that the Soviet Union tried exactly the same thing, and it didn't work. I mean, people were communicating using fax machines, and they called it the samizdat, and the Soviets were never able to get a handle on that. So we may see the end of big, showy, alternative media websites, but just the rise of thousands and thousands of little independent ones, that as soon as the government tries to shut one of them down, 10 more pop up.
Yep. I mean, this is insane. I've told people this is going to happen. Now I'm afraid people are really going to get hurt because they're going to stage these false flags. You know, I mean, Brian Stelter, I call him Pennywise Stelter. He looks like, reminds me of Pennywise the Clown. Friday? He came on air and said about a fake phone call about him and Don Lemon were going to get shot. They're priming the pumps for this.
Yeah, they are. They're selling the idea that violence is coming. Some people are saying violence are good, like Maxine Waters. Those three Antifa riots over the weekend demonstrate that. Last week we were talking about this video that surfaced from Project Veritas, where Antifa are literally teaching their people how to inflict the most damage on their victims that they're beating up.
Yeah, maybe we all need to write a report, a brief, and maybe get it to the president. I don't know what to do. I'm completely out of ideas. I am scared. I'm shaking because, you know, if we lose our first, we lose our second, we lose everything. We lose our entire country.
We're in the process of losing the country. This is not the country I was born into. Every day we can see the further deterioration. You've got the illegal immigrants are being brought on in so the Democrats can steal the November election. The whole country's coming apart. And I've been saying for quite a long time that I foresee a Soviet Union-style collapse as the ultimate fate of the U.S. central government. We could even see the country balkanize, where little groups of states will say, well, we're going to go off and do our own thing. And it might not be a bad idea. It might not be a bad thing at all. You know, the United States is the source of so much suffering and evil in the world today. And it makes me ashamed to be an American. I'm not ashamed of America. I'm not ashamed of the American people, but I certainly am of the government.
I am too. You know, I have my 4 niece here. My God, I hope she can grow up in a free country. And this is why I want to fight, is for little ones like her.
Well, very much so. I mean, it's the next generation we're doing this for. We're all getting old here. We're not going to be around all that much longer anyway. We do what we do in the hopes of providing a better world for the next generation to grow up in.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great day, and hopefully you'll be on the air for a while.
As long as I possibly can. All right. Now then, getting on back to the international news. I know we got a caller on the line, but I'm going to leave it till after the commercial break here. Israel is apparently finally realizing that the optics on what they're doing in Gaza are not good. The world's reaction to the Bloody Monday massacre, the seizure of the Freedom Flotilla ship, and the continuing sniper attacks on unarmed protesters, along with the starvation blockade. Israel's not able to gain the upper hand. So now they're talking maybe peace. More about that when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about new developments in Israel related to Gaza, where Israel is now starting to talk truce. And the talks are basically focused on easing the restrictions on Gaza in return for the Palestinians calming their side of the frontier. Well, there wasn't that much going on their side of the frontier, so that should be relatively easy. And apparently, the United Nations and Egypt have waded on in with some proposals, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to convene his security cabinet to discuss these plans. So Israel, again, appears to have realized that the optics of what they're doing in Gaza, in Palestine, in the West Bank, it's not good. The corporate media can't cover for them anymore. All right, let's take a phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you would think that God would have chosen some representatives that were a little bit less warmongering, mass murdering, child killing criminals, at least in the government.
Well, I mean, if you read the Old Testament,
the chosen ones should be the best representatives of the human race. That would make sense. So something's a little fishy here. Well, but I do realize it's the
Mateus,
wrong Jews.
Mateus, read the Old Testament, which is the Jews' Torah. The God depicted in that Old Testament, he's right out there. He's a perfect match for the Jewish people. And that's because he was created by the Jewish people. That's what my girlfriend says is, why are we so interested in the Old Testament? That's obviously, that's for the Jews. That's the Jews' Bible, which is fine. But why are we all adopting it for ourselves? And even right in the Bible, it says, when Adam and Eve went out into the world, they encountered other peoples. So it admits it right there that it wasn't actually the beginning of all humanity. So let's let them have this Old Testament. That's fine. Everyone's allowed to have, but there's no reason why the rest of the world has to be in such reverence of it, especially since, like you said, it's following like Dark Ages mentality. Bronze Age. I mean, right there in Genesis, I mean, after Cain slays Abel, he goes on out and he finds a wife. Where did she come from? And so you're right. It's people ask me, how is it I lost my religion? Well, I was raised congregational, sang in the church choir for like 5 years, and then they gave me a Bible, and that was their downfall because I actually read it.
Yeah, hey, it was a Drudge Report story yesterday that in Canada there was a mosque that gave a serum preaching to kill the non-believers. And so the Canadian authorities said that you are such a racist, intolerant fool. If you take that literally, you're supposed to understand that this was written a long time ago and it should be interpreted differently to mean not kill the infidels now. And then, but then they also said, but we do distance ourselves from any interpretation of it being literal. So they're like, it doesn't mean that, but if it does mean that, then we're officially distancing that because obviously it's too much, but it doesn't mean it, but if it does, it's like, it's just totally ridiculous. And we already had our terrorist attack in Toronto. ISIS claimed responsibility for it. The guy's name's Hussein. And what does our government do? Oh, there's no possibility that it could be related to terrorism. Well, if I go to the police station and I say I want to confess I murdered somebody, that is an eyewitness. That is a testimony. That's worth something in a court of law. So just the fact that you had a terrorist group testifying that they did it, it doesn't mean for sure they did it, but it's definitely of interest. And our government says there's no interest in that whatsoever.
Okay, well, Mateus, you need to understand right now in these times, politicians and propagandists will seize on anything that happens to push their agenda. And frankly, what happened in Toronto, to me, we know the guy was mentally ill. And I do think it was just somebody went off his nut and, went out and did these terrible things. But to a propagandist, it's like a gift from the heavens. Oh, there's been a violent act. Let's get somebody to call up and say, hey, I'm ISIS and we did it. Take the blame for it. Keep the narrative going that ISIS is bad. I mean, sometimes you really need to step back and realize the extent to which we are all being lied to about absolutely everything. It's nonstop lies to sell us on war and hate.
They did offer a motive, which is plausible, which is that they were saying that this was part of the retaliation for Canada partaking in some of in bombing runs and invasions in the Middle East. And so it shouldn't just be thrown out. It should be, at least our government should say, you know what, we'll consider all options. But for them to just take this hard line that there's no chance that there is any link to possible terrorism, it's just disingenuous. But that's not actually why I called. I wanted to complain about Trudeau marching in the Pride Parade yesterday in Vancouver, Canada. At one point, I got a picture of him. He's waving. He's got a black flag. I couldn't see what kind of black flag, and then a rainbow flag. So, and then he was looking like he won the lottery. He was just so elated and so overjoyed, and he's hugging a drag queen at one time. And the news article says drag queens love Trudeau, and this is tax money that's being spent discriminating towards favoring a minority of the Canadian population. 3-5% are of this group, and it doesn't represent. He's an elected representative. That doesn't represent 3 to 5%. It's not representing us, and we're just having this pushed down our throat so hard. There's a bus stop, a City of Vancouver bus stop sign with big flag colors, and it says it says oral pleasure is our business. And then it's a grocery store. It's like, oh, okay, very, very clever. But
I love it.
The children are seeing this. Yep. This is at a park. So, you got a 10-year-old that can read, and they know what oral is from school. Everyone's always talking about sex, even from a young age. So they know it. So that children promoting oral sex endorsed by the government taking a cut from it.
Okay, Mateus, I want to back up here a little bit before I let you just rant on and use up the rest of the hour. You said that tax money was involved in the Gay Pride Parade. Are you talking about more than just providing, police for security, or did they actually fund the parade directly?
Well, I'm talking about putting up, using government vehicles to put flags up on street poles. I'm talking about painting crosswalks rainbow. I'm talking about paying for Trudeau to have security and to travel across. I mean, this. I don't understand that this event legitimately falls into any of his public servant duties. He's not negotiating anything. It's not a business deal. It's not a legislation. It's not a campaign.
No, I see.
It's literally a hobby.
I see where you're going with this, and I think painting the crosswalks rainbow, I think was inappropriate because now they're going to have to go back and paint them back to whatever the street codes require. Anyway, listen, Mateus, I got to let you go. The phone lines are loading up.
Oh, a joke. Just a quick joke.
Okay, one joke.
Oh, okay, angry joke recipient. Okay, what did the chef say when he found out that the dishwasher left the freezer open all night?
No idea.
Not cool. But hey, it's original jokes. Your show is the only place getting these original content. So, okay, thanks. I'll have a good day.
All right, imagine my pride over that one. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I think that Israel appearing to reach out for peace I think that's a complete misinterpretation. I mean, what they're doing with Gaza, for one thing, and they've done it many times before, is they're freeing up their southern front because maybe they're getting ready to take on Hezbollah, or maybe an attack on Iran is imminent, and they're going to have to take on Hezbollah, or whatever. They just completed a barrier. I think I saw it on your site.
Yes.
That is blockading. They actually are sealing them off by sea, literally by filling in landfall, sealing them off. They're killing people over the weekend. They're doing everything the same, and they're not into peace at all. Their foreign policy has been very, very successful, which is basically, let's you and him fight, chaos on the borders that they foment, expand into it, and there's also the thing, Mike, where they're in the process of migrating away from the U.S., even though there's no alliance with Israel. They didn't want one, by the way, for everybody out there listening. You can't have a formal alliance with a country that won't control, actually define its borders. So if there is a border incursion or something like that, that would trigger the alliance mechanism and so on. But they haven't needed to. They can get whatever they want from us without any reciprocity whatsoever, without giving anything. But what they're starting to do now, because Russia has now an enormous influence on their security, they're now on the border. They're bordering Russian power. And it's their own fault. They started the whole thing in Syria. They're fomenting that along with the United States. But here they are, and so Russia holds that out, and Russia holds on really whether they keep going on or not. So they are starting to leave us, and now they're migrating to a position in foreign policy, speak as a holder of the balance, the way that Britain used to in the 19th century when France was ascendant in Europe with Napoleon and so on.
Yes.
Then they allied with Spain, and they allied with Prussia. And then when Germany became ascendant, they allied with France. So that's what they're doing now. They're going to align with who is ascendant. It turns out that Russia is ascendant in the Middle East, at least for Israel's physical security. And you can already see it. The constant trips to Moscow.
Yes.
So on and so forth. They're starting to abandon this husk that they've sucked dry.
Yes.
They'll still take their money until we deliver it in the Zimbabwe like wheelbarrows that they're forcing us into. But that's what's going on in my book. It's not peace at all. Their objective remains the Euphrates to the to the Mediterranean to the Euphrates, and even beyond that, they really see themselves as a world power, and that's really going. Peace has nothing to do. It's not even their lexicon.
Well, no, I made a point of saying this is all about public image. They're trying to repair the damage that they've done to their public image. They're going to have a tough time doing it. I mean, what happened on the Bloody Monday massacre, that's staying with people. The moving of the embassy, that angered a lot of people. And even other Jewish people in other countries are saying, we can't support this any longer.
Mike, if I can say, I know you refer to that as a Bloody Monday massacre, but these are massacres that have taken place like all of April, half of May. Ongoing right now.
Yeah, I know.
They're still shooting people down.
Yeah, every Friday.
It's not just Bloody Monday. Yeah, every Friday and beyond. Every Friday and beyond. It's but it's not just a one day. Let's just say the ongoing massacres and pogroms against the Gazans in the West Bank. Kleptocracy and so on, genocidal kleptocracy. But at any rate, it's what we can. Everybody can be rest assured. Israel doesn't want peace. That's the last thing they want. They get everything they want through war. Maybe getting other people to fight it, but everything they want, it can only be gotten through force. You don't even get a country when there's people living on it unless you force them off, kill them, and terrorize them, and rape them, and turn them into refugees. That's how Israel became. And that's how Israel is proceeding.
Well, you make a very, very good point. But again, when I reported on that story about a possible truce, I did say it's all about Israel's public image. It's not concern for the Gazans. It's just a concern for how the world is looking at Israel right now, which is not in a favorable light. Now, whether Israel is going to stage some kind of a false flag terror attack, to try and regain the victimhood, we don't know. But, Israel knows how to play the public relations game very well. And I think they're backing off on Gaza. And now they're going to work on polishing their image somehow.
It's the press is so completely controlled by them.
Yep.
It's tough to. The point made by the gentleman from West Virginia that was talking about shutting down Alex Jones, and they are the press. They control it all. Disney, Les Moonves, Michael Eisner, they are the media. They control it all. And those are the people that actually manage it. The owners also have the same kind of names. But nevertheless, they cannot survive with clarity. They have to have that artificial construct of people like Wolf Blitzer, who's an AIPAC, wouldn't even be anywhere without coming up from AIPAC, and so on and so forth. Without that filter, they're nowhere. And so they have to shut you guys down.
Yep.
This medium has to be shut down. And they are completely against free speech, freedom of the press. It's antithetical to really a racial supremacist group that sees himself taking over the world in some ways. But at any rate, that's my comment. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I mean, there's no question that there is this presumed supremacy, and there are all kinds of quotes from Israeli luminaries that support what you're saying, that they see themselves as automatically superior to the rest of the world and therefore entitled to eventually run the world. It's also hardwired into their religion that ultimately they're going to rule the world, and that's when the Messiah will show up. Anyway, listen, Peter, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to take a phone call from Helen in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Helen. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Helen, are you there? Okay, I guess Helen went away here.
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
Yes, I'm here.
You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Well, everybody's talking about all these wars and that everywhere. I don't believe in wars to begin with, and worry is a sin. God Almighty works in mysterious ways supernaturally all over the world, and everything is on God's timetable. It's not on man. And there'll never be a war in the Holy Land because that one, God will intervene. So
there's already been a war in the Holy Land.
To worry.
There's already been a war in the Holy Land. I mean, there have been endless wars in the Holy Land. The Holy Crusades. Israel's taking the land away from the Palestinians. It's one of the most fought over pieces of dirt on earth.
Just give it time. Nobody has patience. We are not born with patience. We have to acquire patience in this life.
Okay, well,
Michael.
Well, thank you for your call then.
Anyways, I was going to tell you, he took a wife in the land of Nod. Ken Rabel, one of them, took a wife in the land of Nod. Capital N-O-D. You have a great day.
Well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here and get back to the news. Now, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Fernand de Varins, has started...
Thank you.
Goodbye, Helen. Thank you for the phone call. All right. So the UN Special Reporter on Minority Issues, Fernand de Varennes, has started official proceedings to investigate a complaint that has been brought against Israel, submitted by the High Follow-up Committee for Arab Citizens of Israel regarding the recent nation-state law. And basically whether it would be considered valid in today's world of international law. Of course, Israel is not going to backtrack on it, and the United Nations won't be able to do anything about it other than to pass a General Assembly resolution wagging their finger at Israel, because if anything goes to the Security Council, the United States will veto it again. So, the United States government has helped create a new apartheid state, and that is exactly what it is. So there's a story out of IsraelPalestineNews.org, and it's talking about how college campuses here in the United States are being just flooded with these militant, pro-Israel, often anonymous, anti-boycott campaigns. And some of them are so rough, they're even making pro-Israel Jews uncomfortable. So they're still pushing back on that one. Like I said, Israel's trying to find a way to polish their public image. Anyway, we'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And the corporate media is still pounding this issue of Russia's meddling in our elections. And again, they don't have any proof of it. It's pure propaganda. Just repeat, 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 repeat until people believe it just because they've heard it so much. Classic propaganda tactic. Meanwhile, as we mentioned last week, Noam Chomsky in a recent TV interview was saying Israeli intervention in U.S. elections completely overwhelms anything Russia might have done. But nobody talks about that. So, now, another thing that the corporate media is silent on is how the U.S. meddles in other elections in other countries. And they do it all the time. They've been election rigging in other countries, at least going back to the end of World War II. But that's okay. We're the good guys. We're allowed to meddle in other countries' elections because we're exceptional here. Okay, Israel has launched military exercises in the Golan Heights. It's a one-week exercise, and Israel is saying basically it's part of an annual training plan that aims to maintain readiness of our forces. So Israel's apparently still very nervous that Syria might decide they want that place back here. Meanwhile, the Syrians accuse Israel of assassinating a top missile scientist in Hama province. And again, the U.S. corporate media is claiming this guy was involved in Syria's chemical weapons program, which Syria doesn't have one. But every opportunity, the guy was a scientist. Oh, he had to be working on the chemical weapons. He was a missile scientist. It doesn't matter. We tell the American people he's working on chemical weapons here. Now, for some reason, Saudi Arabia has gotten very upset with Canada. Apparently, this has to do with the arrest and detention in Saudi Arabia of a Canadian activist, a women's rights activist. And Canada basically just called up real nicely and said, we'd like to have her back. And Saudi Arabia cut diplomatic and trade ties with Canada, claiming blatant interference. Now, if this story is accurate about the proximate cause of this, I'd say that's a little bit of an overreaction. All right, let's take a phone call here. Rick in Winnipeg, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I was just wondering, I might have missed your show if you commented on Alex Jones being kicked off YouTube.
Well, we had some callers who called in on it, and I'm going to be doing a lot about that a little bit further in the show, probably about hour 3.
Okay, because it just makes you wonder if he is, then what's next, eh?
Oh, they're going to come after all of us one by one. They're going to pick us off one by one because they can't allow freedom of speech or the free exchange of ideas in this country. We're descending into dictatorship.
Right. Okay, I'll listen later then. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Joe in Glendale. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Before I ask my question, I just have a plea for mercy to Mateus in Canada. Mateus, please, no more jokes. For the sake of my health, for the sake of humanity, no more jokes. It's gotten so bad, I'm wishing that the pharmaceuticals would come out with a pill that I could take to immunize myself from the punchlines.
Okay. Well, what's your question?
I have a question I want to ask you, and I'd like, if she's listening, Layla from Canada, if she could weigh in on this as well. We've heard over the past decades about the Arab Street and their reaction to certain events, either in Israel or elsewhere in the Middle East. My question is, what's happened to the Arab Street in light of all of the massacres that have taken place in Gaza? I've seen nothing, no reaction at all from, especially a place like Jordan that has so many Palestinians living there, or in Riyadh, or Baghdad, or elsewhere in the Gulf, or in Cairo. What's happening, Mike? Is it because the average Arab could care less about the Palestinians, or is it because the security services in these countries have such a tight lid on the population that they can't go out and demonstrate against what Israel is doing to the Palestinians?
I imagine it's a combination of that and a combination of the fact that just like they've done in this country, Israel has compromised the governments in a lot of the other nations in the Mideast area, coupled with the fact that if they're, our American corporate media hasn't been reporting on any of the atrocities anyway. Why would they report on any protests that were staged because of the atrocities? Everything you've probably heard about this is mostly on the independent media. I know the corporate media was pushing the storyline about burning kites and burning balloons on how poor Israel was defending itself, but it could simply be a case of a media blackout at this end of the pipeline.
Yes, but does this prove this lack of reaction from the Arab Street to what's happening to the Palestinians? Does this prove that the Arab Spring was just a manufactured creation of the Western security services, that it wasn't this organic protest?
Well, we've known that all along. The Arab Spring was basically a tool to regime change countries. They tried it in Iran in 2009. It fell flat on its face. And they may be getting ready to try and do it again because there do seem to be some foreign state actors in Iran trying to stir up trouble.
Two more items, Mike. Mike, first, Nicaragua. Another reason why Nicaragua is in the sights of the U.S. is because Nicaragua was one of 6 countries to recognize Abkhazia and South Ossetia's independence and the accession of Crimea to Russia. So that's another thing that's working against Nicaragua. Yeah,
could very well be.
And then last item, these guys in the IDF has this image, they're such a strong military. They're a bunch of pussies, excuse my French. Okay? The only people that they can fight are rock throwing youths, Palestinian grandmothers, unarmed protesters in Gaza, and human rights activists on these flotillas. Put them up against Hezbollah, put them up against Iran, they'll get the crap kicked out of them, and it's been proven. They got beat in 2006 by Hezbollah. The only foes that they can oppose are Palestinian grandmothers and human rights activists, unarmed. That's it.
Well, that's why Israel wants the Americans to go up against Hezbollah and Iran.
Exactly. Well, Mike, as the famous Francis from North Carolina says, I'm out of here later.
All right, we'll see you later here. And, you know, when you look at how ineffective a fighting force the Israelis are against a peer, it kind of underscores that all of the money that the U.S. taxpayer has been forced to give them for all those weapons was kind of a waste. As this caller said, Israel's really good at fighting helpless enemies, just like the U.S. has been doing in Afghanistan and thought they were doing in Syria. Boy, did they get a wake-up call there here. against appear? I don't know. All right, another phone call. No, that was the last phone call. The lines are empty. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. Now, here's an interesting development. You remember when Rex Tillerson got fired, and a lot of people were trying to figure out just why, what had gone wrong somewhere, and it was during that whole Sergei Skripal poisoning, Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it, that Tillerson basically came on out highly critical of Russia. And a lot of people were saying that's why he was fired. We were still trying to make nice with Russia at that time. No, we weren't, but that was the cover story. But it turns out what happened is that Saudi Arabia wanted to invade Qatar last summer. And basically, Tillerson worked to stop it. And Saudi Arabia, along with the United Arab Emirates, wanted to go into Qatar, and Tillerson attempted to mediate to end their blockade of Qatar. And so it's thought that that was the real reason he was being fired. He was actually trying to bring peace to the region. Over in Hodeidah, heavy fighting has resumed. Over 80 people have been killed in the last 2 days. And Hodeidah, of course, is that last Houthi-controlled port in Yemen and the lone source for aid for the entire northern half of the country. Now, there was this plan to turn the control of the port over to the United Nations, but that seems to have stalled for some reason. And we do know that a lot of the Saudi-aligned Yemenites don't want that to go through. Now remember, all of this is about regime change. Several years ago, the United States had a successful regime change in Yemen. They brought down the legitimate government. They installed a junta. And the people of Yemen decided they didn't want to live under a foreign puppet rule. So they basically kicked out the installed government. And that's when the U.S. got Saudi Arabia to go back in and say, you will love your puppet rulers, or bad things will happen. And unfortunately bad things are happening. So apparently Saudi warplanes stuck a crowded Hodeidah fish market. And they hit it when there was a crowd of people packed in to purchase one of Yemen's only abundant domestic sources of food. They can still fish off their coastline. And again, bombing of civilians, bombing of food sources, these are war crimes. Now, it looked like everything was going good between the two Koreas, and then all of a sudden, we're starting to get this fan up of propaganda that North Korea is in violation of the Trump agreement, and a lot of this goes back to a report coming out of the UN, which in turn is coming out of the United States, which is now accusing North Korea for violating the UN sanctions concerning their nuclear testing and missile development programs. Now, the accusations come from this 6-month report released last week by the UN, which claims Pyongyang is violating restrictions on both of these programs according to new intelligence gathered. And we know that intelligence can be faked. Remember how they did that in Iraq. And Korea is also being accused of violating economic sanctions through a massive increase in illicit ship-to-ship transfers of petroleum products, as well as through transfers of coal at sea during 2018. The Security Council also claimed the DPRK was assisting the government of Syria with weapons, as well as attempting to sell arms to the Ansarullah movement in Yemen. Well, they basically just covered the whole affair with that one claim. And frankly, dragging Yemen into it, I think for me that was the shark. We know we get lied into these wars. Now, I'm sure that Trump really meant well, and he wanted to be seen as a statesman trying for peace, but there are a lot of people who still want war with Korea. Now, North Korea has come on back and said, look, we dismantled the missile testing stand. We're not building anything new, either missile or nuclear. It's time for the United States to make a gesture in good faith. And the one they're asking for right now is an official end to the Korean War to replace the current armistice. And I can't imagine why the United States would hesitate. It's not going to cost them anything to sign a paper and say the war is now officially over. Now, China has rejected the U.S. demand to cut oil imports from Iran. And this is starting to crop up in other countries. India looks like they're still going to buy oil from Iran. And the Trump administration is out there saying it wants to cut Iranian oil exports to zero by November 4th. But most analysts are saying that's likely not going to happen. There are too many people who need that oil. There are too many countries who are just getting sick and tired of the fact that the U.S. is just sanctioning everybody in an attempt to throw their weight around. That's how it's being perceived around the world. Do what the U.S. says or you'll be sanctioned. And ultimately what's going to happen, the U.S. is isolating itself economically and politically from the rest of the world. The global economy is already starting to reshape and reform into a new global economy that will have a big dark hole in the middle where the U.S. used to be. That's what's going to happen. Whether it's BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, they're setting up all these parallel banking monetary transfer systems that don't go through the United States. Okay, a lot of people are very surprised when Donald Trump is endorsing Chris Kobach for Kansas governor. And of course, Trump had tapped Kobach to head up his now shut down voter fraud commission, which I still don't agree that Trump should have done that. The Department of Homeland Security doesn't seem to really be looking at the issue of election fraud beyond the issue of whether those electronic voting machines and tabulating machines are secure. Apparently, the Department of Homeland Security is not looking at the issue of illegal immigrant voting or ballot tampering. Remember when the commission was actually up and running, they were getting this huge pushback from the state election commissions, which basically telegraphed there is a major problem. Don't you dare come in and look to see if our elections are honest. Now, we're getting a report that Trump is about to override Rosenstein and declassify the remaining Department of Justice FISA documents. So we are going to get to see what's underneath those black marks, and reports are that what's underneath the black marks is extremely embarrassing to the FBI. Poor FBI. Let's all feel bad for them. Okay, now, Trump's attorneys are questioning whether or not Robert Mueller's special counsel is even legal. And they took the case first to two Obama-appointed judges who basically sat on their hands and did nothing. Now they've got it before a Trump-appointed judge. And here is the issue. The current law for a special counsel requires a crime to be committed. But there was no crime named in Rod Rosenstein's order to set up the Mueller special counsel. Special counsels are supposed to be set up to look for a specific crime that has to be in the document. I'm setting up a special counsel who will look into whatever the crime is. Rosenstein didn't do that. Rosenstein also violated the special counsel law because a special counsel is usually appointed only after a regular Department of Justice investigation reveals that a crime may have been committed. And that's when the special counsel is thrown on it. Rosenstein just blew this. The special counsel's office is completely illegal. So we'll see what happens in the court case here. Getting back to vote fraud, even Peter Fonda is out there saying, yeah, it's okay. Peter Fonda literally came on out and said, just steal their ballots and do it for them. How can liberals get millennials to vote for Democrats in 2018? And he basically said, you know, if you have a millennial in your family, take their early ballots, fill them out, and mail them in, or take the ballot to the voting place and give it to the officials. No more worrying. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're going to steal this election. It's just right out in the open. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And last week, the New York Times got itself in a little bit of a controversy by hiring Sarah Jeong. And she has this long history of Twitter posts that are clearly sexist, racist, male bashing, just very offensive stuff. And the New York Times tried to explain it all away by saying, well, she was bullied by trolls online, and that's why she is the way that she is. And nobody's buying that. Even Tucker Carlson was out there saying that the New York Times defense of what he calls an angry bigot, Sarah Jeong, is just ugly and awful. And Carlson pointed out how the New York Times statement tried to portray Jeong as the victim. Oh, she was bullied, so we have to be understanding about this. Now, most people have rejected the tweets of Sarah Jeong and her obvious bias. There are a few exceptions, such as right here in Hawaii, where our Senator Brian Schatz is supporting her. And this was being reported out of the Gateway Pundit. And Brian Schatz actually lives somewhere right around us, and I know that because back in 2016 on Halloween, he came to our door with his kids, trick-or-treating, and I was wearing my Hillary for Prison t-shirt, and I guess he spotted the word Hillary because he came running up the front walk saying, "Hi, I'm Brian Schatz," and then he got close enough to see what the shirt really said, and he just turned an about face and just walked away as fast as he could with his family. So my one meeting with Brian Schatz here. Now, it turns out that along with all of her male bashing and other inflammatory tweets, Sarah Jeong also trashed the New York Times. So is the New York Times going to say they were bullying Sarah Jeong too, and therefore it's understandable? But it kind of makes you wonder what they were thinking to hire this person. Now, Candace Owens decided to illustrate just how serious this was. And by the way, Twitter left those Sarah Jeong tweets up. They've been deleted now, but they were left up for weeks on end. So Candace Owens basically retweeted them, but changed the word white to black, or to Hispanic, or to Jewish, to illustrate that this is really serious. And Twitter immediately suspended her. So in Twitter's view, it's okay to be out there posting blatantly anti-white sentiments, but not okay to be saying the same thing about blacks or Jews. And I find that very alarming that this anti-white racism is becoming acceptable and normalized. Are we headed into the same path as South Africa and Zimbabwe? Now, apparently this morning, Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk were having breakfast at a restaurant, and some Antifa activists came on in and attacked them, threw food at them, dumped water on Charlie's head. Now, Antifa is this all-white fascist organization, and it's getting violent. So it's like we're getting into the civil rights crisis all over again, only in reverse here. And just to show how hysterical things are going, Apparently, Tucker Carlson was going to interview Kathy Aru, who is a political columnist and a feminist, and basically her point was masculinity is toxic and that men are responsible for committing all the crimes in society, that women can do no wrong. Obviously, she's never heard of Katie Bender or the Manson girls. So apparently, originally, Tucker Carlson was supposed to have Kutztown University professor Colleen Clemens on, but she canceled, saying she feared for her safety. And she was replaced by Aru, who basically said men are the worst things since the Holocaust. This is what passes for discourse on corporate media. This is like the 1990s male bash on steroids. Now, FBI records are showing that the author of the Russian dossier, Christopher Steele, was actually deemed not suitable for use as a source because he disclosed his relationship with the FBI to a third party, and so he was cut off as a confidential human source. However, there were at least 11 FBI payments made to Steele in 2016. So once again, this is tracking back to the FBI being behind all of this thing. Was this Peter Strzok's brainchild? All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over the weekend, there was a lot of violence in the streets of the United States, and apparently at the Rhode Island State House on Saturday, there was a conservative group calling themselves the Resist Marxism, and they organized the Providence Freedom Rally. So far, so good. The pro-freedom group was met by hundreds of violent far-left Antifa terrorists who were claiming that the Providence Freedom Rally was a Nazi event, and the Antifa terrorists basically beat heads, damaged sound equipment, tore up the tents, and succeeded in shutting down the Freedom Rally. So there were incidents like this in 3 major cities: Portland, Providence, and Berkeley. And Antifa basically cracked skulls and beat protesters. In Portland, Oregon, they beat up a grandmother. The corporate media has not reported on this hardly at all, with one exception. CBS reported on the story and tried to spin it that the violence was started by the Trump supporters, which is a replay of what we were seeing back leading up to the election in 2016, when there were violent confrontations. Oh, it's always the Trump supporters. It's the Trump supporters who do it. No, it's Antifa. And like I said, Project Veritas got a videotape of Antifa literally training their people how to inflict maximum damage on their victims. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the economy. And there's a strategist, Bill Blaine. He's over at the Mint Partners. And he's saying basically 10 years after the 2008 financial crisis, very little has been fixed. In fact, if anything, we've had more deregulation. And he says the next bubble is about to burst, and this time the bond markets will trigger the mayhem rather than the mortgage-backed securities. Now, along with everything else that they're dealing with, apparently older Americans are seeing a spike in the number of personal bankruptcies they're having to endure because pensions are defunded. Pension payments are now legally being reduced. Meanwhile, of course, rents, cost of food are going up. And driving the surge is basically a 3-decade shift of financial risk from government and employers to individuals who are bearing an ever greater responsibility for their own financial well-being as the social safety net shrinks. But those refugees and illegal immigrants are getting all kinds of goodies. Remember that former member of the House of Representatives was out there saying, we have to pay those families announced as racist. But we do need to put America first. Because right now, in so many ways, Americans are being put dead last behind the illegal immigrants, the refugees, the LGBTQ. We're being left behind in the dust from all this craziness that's going on. This year, the U.S. government will have to pay $500 billion just to service its debt. And the debt is unpayable. Basically, they're paying the interest only. And the people who set up the Federal Reserve a little more than 100 years ago knew this would be the eventual outcome. But they didn't care. They wanted lives of wealth, luxury, and privilege, and they got them, and they went to their graves happy. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is saying that the U.S. will enforce sanctions against Iran. And he's out there with these very bizarre statements saying that increasing pressure on Tehran was meant to push back against Iranian malign activity. Well, the only thing that's malign about Iran's activity is they want to run their own country their own way. And Mike Pompeo made a reference to the fact that Iranians are in the streets, unhappy with the economy. And he says, it's got nothing to do with the U.S. You know, they're unhappy with their leadership because their leadership created this mess. No, Iran's leadership did not create the mess. There was an Iranian deal. Everybody was happy with it. Trump pulls out of it, throws on the sanctions. And once again, we get nothing but lies about what's really going on. Now, Iran is easing currency exchange regulations. And obviously the sanctions went into effect today. And Iranians rather are basically trying to get into gold as quickly as they can. Meanwhile, Iran has arrested their central bank's top foreign exchange official. They're not saying exactly why, but he was arrested along with several other unnamed individuals, including a government clerk and 4 currency brokers. Looks like they may have been doing something a little underhanded there. Now, over at the Washington Post, they, like Mike Pompeo, are dropping the blame for Trump's unilateral sanctions on Iran. It's all Iran's fault. If you would just do what we tell you to do, we wouldn't have to sanction you. And we're allowed to sanction you. We're the good guys. We're policing the world here. And so Iran is making whatever preparations they can, and they are getting some help. Remember, China's going to go on buying Iranian oil. It looks like India might. Germany issued a statement today saying that the EU are going to take steps to protect their legitimate business with Iran. So they're not going along with this either. And I think the United States would be very, very reckless throwing more sanctions onto Europe. That's not going to make the situation better. It's going to make it worse. Now, because of the impending sanctions, a lot of foreign car makers are leaving Iran, led by Peugeot and Renault, and they're leaving the market, causing a shortage of parts. Here's where it gets interesting. China is going to step in. And so they're going to be manufacturing cars in Iran. So now the United States government has come out with a new legislation called NOPEC, which stands for No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act. And basically, it legalizes the U.S. government to sue OPEC and OPEC plus countries like Russia because of their coordinated efforts to control oil prices. They're treating it like a cartel. International lawsuits are, of course, unenforceable. But what the United States could do is use a court decision as justification for more sanctions. This is going to blow up on our face. This sanctioning everybody on the planet is going to blow up on our face. The rest of the world is just going to say, we're not going to do business with the United States anymore. You don't have anything we want. We don't want your GMO agriculture. We'll start learning how to make our own jet planes and computers, and, well, the computers are coming from Asia anyway. They're just going to drop contact with the U.S. as being more trouble than it's really worth. Meanwhile, the Magnitsky trio of Senators John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Ben Cardin are back out there pushing for war with Russia, with more sanctions against them. They cannot seriously think this is going to turn out well. The United States has been at war multiple places for 18 years. Our stockpiles are drawn down. Our weapons are worn out. The new weapons coming out of the military-industrial complex are costly junk. This is insanity here. All right, let's see. Let's take some phone calls. Steve Elkins, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you said a good phrase there. You said, make America great, make America first. I agree 100%, but I just wanted to direct your listeners to the RBN website, which there's an awesome, I won't say awesome, it's a very disturbing video of California collapse. Actually, I think that's the title of the video, and it basically shows a 5 minutes and 33 seconds long. It's a video showing homeless camps all over California, and when I hear about all the money we're spending elsewhere and what we're spending it on and not getting our money's worth, and I see these videos, they pop up here and there. Of course, we'll never see one of these surface on the mainstream media, but just direct your listeners to that website to watch that video. It is very disturbing, and it's growing. The problem is growing.
Yes, it is. It really is. I mean,
Very
the money
disturbing.
junkies are sucking this country dry, and they don't care what pain they're causing.
Don't seem to care about the veterans returning home from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Nope.
They don't care about homeless. They, I don't know. It's very disturbing to see the video. And like I said, these homeless camps are growing. When I left California, I came to California in 2007, Santa Rosa, and I didn't see much of a visual homelessness problem. Didn't see it. Before I left in 2017, it is everywhere in Santa Rosa and extending outwards. It is a serious problem. That's just Northern California, what I saw. It's really bad.
Yeah. No, I remember when I was living in Southern California, there were homeless, but it was very, very rare. It was very, very rare. And then after we had moved out here to Hawaii for a while, and we went back for a wedding, and I remember just being shocked at how underneath every single freeway there were these homeless camps. And it's out of control. And, you know, they're throwing open the borders to flood this country with illegal immigrants who aren't supposed to be able to work or vote. And it's causing strain on the housing market. We don't have enough jobs for people.
Yeah.
And let alone the illegal immigrants. And it's causing this huge amount
along
of...
with that sanctuary city and the sanctuary state, you've got now people displaced from the North California fires now. I mean, you're just really tossing a lot onto this whole issue. I mean, homelessness. There's thousands of people probably that are going to be losing their homes in California now from these fires, and added to the total of the homelessness. This is going to be really bad.
It is really bad. I mean, we've got about somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 homeless just on this island, and this is a relatively tiny rock.
That's it for me, Mike.
All right. Well, I just found the video, and I'm posting it to whatreallyhappened.com so people can look at it. But it's not just Canada. We're seeing signs of economic stagnation, deterioration all across the country. We even say it out here in Hawaii. And our nation is clearly being mismanaged. It's being sucked dry for whatever wealth is left in the pockets of the American people, and basically used to go wage war on the rest of the world. And it's going to end badly. There's no way the United States can beat the entire rest of the world. All right, we're going to take another phone call. W in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike, I was just calling about the whole free speech situation with so many popular channels and people just being just completely censored off the net, and the net is like it's kind of like the whole book burning. Of course, it's digital book burning.
Yep.
And I just find it pretty offensive, to be honest. It's just because they say that it's for one reason, but it's so much deeper than that. When you talk about like the subject matters that you talk about, from the GMOs to the vaccines to the wars to the money, all these different issues, but they attack people on these sort of ambiguous reasons, and it's really offensive, and it's kind of crazy. It's really kind of scary to see it.
Well, you know, it's basically they're just using the phrase hate, and apparently whatreallyhappened.com is already being blocked on a lot of publicly available Wi-Fi hotspots. Apparently, they're all going to the same company for their content filtering, and this company has basically, you know, blocked sites like BuzzFeed, myself. They're really digging on in. They want to recapture control of what Americans are thinking. And again, it's a replay of what happened when Gutenberg invented movable type printing. And all of a sudden, the middle class could afford their own books and do their own learning. And they tried to stop that back then. But yeah, what's happening to Alex Jones is flat out wrong. And there may be a backlash coming. And I don't just mean in terms of the users. Okay? Going to talk about that next hour.
Real quick, how difficult is it to build a search engine? Like, I'll end with that. How difficult is it to build a search engine?
Well, we're going to different platforms. You know, there are all these brand new startup companies, Yandex search engine, DuckDuckGo, Real Videos Online. I'm still waiting for my channel to be created so I can transfer over to that. Kim.com is coming up with a censorship-proof replacement for Twitter. And when these things come on up, people are going to go to them. Nobody likes being told what they can and cannot say or post. And again, Google and Facebook are already feeling the backlash. They're losing users. They're losing ad revenues.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, your line is breaking up. Was there something else?
Oh, got it. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Okay, apparently over in Canada, consumers are very upset about the tariffs and the bashing of Trudeau, and they are now buying Canadian and cross-border production chains. Well, basically, they're filling up their shopping carts with Canadian products. They're boycotting the USA. And it doesn't even appear to be organized. It's just the Canadians being angry about what's going on. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Paul Craig Roberts is out with another article, Americans Live in a World of Lies. And it gets right to the heart of the propaganda we're getting regarding the economy. And he's saying a lot of the same things we've been saying here on this show for a long time. So it begins with last Friday when the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced that the unemployment rate was 3.9%. And Paul Craig Roberts is asking, how can this be when the Bureau of Labor Statistics also reports that the labor force participation rate has declined for a decade throughout the length of the supposed economic recovery, and there is no upward pressure on wages from full employment. When labor is in short supply, employers have to raise wages and salaries. We're not seeing that. And he basically comes on down. He's saying full employment with no wage pressure and no rise in the labor force participation is impossible. The government is lying. Now, Wells Fargo had a little bit of a whoopsie, apparently, with some of their software. And apparently something like 600 Wells Fargo customers lost their homes to foreclosure when the software used by Wells Fargo incorrectly denied them mortgage modifications. And Wells Fargo apparently fessed up, and they've set aside $8 million to compensate customers affected by the glitch. Well, I think it should be more. I think there should be punitive damages. And it also speaks to the issue that people are creating or buying software and putting it into use without thoroughly testing it out. Now, the other day, I was commenting on how these weather apps on the cell phone aren't really very good. They very rarely agree with each other, and that maybe one of them should have an AI. Well, as it turns out, Weather Channel's app uses Watson, which supposedly is able to learn from its own mistakes. But as time goes on, its accuracy seems to be getting worse and worse, and raises the possibility that AIs may not automatically be working toward a better understanding of the subject, but they may be getting confused and lost. And using the incredible power of their CPUs, they may be going as fast as they can in the wrong direction. So let's talk now about immigration events around the world here. Apparently a tourist, an American tourist who went to Spain, was attacked by migrants and just says, Spain is becoming third world. And apparently he saw a group of migrants surrounding a woman and hitting her, and he tried to intervene, and the migrants basically tried to kill him. And he says, now I have a bad image of Spain. Yeah, I could imagine so. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials, actually for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about the Eurozone. And apparently over in Italy, in the streets of Ferrara, Nigerian migrants are waging war with machetes, axes, and knives. Apparently knives are very popular with the incoming migrants, and knife crime is up all over the Eurozone, as a matter of fact. But apparently there are 2 rival Nigerian gangs in this town, and they're basically chopping each other up. And police and emergency services have been responding to scenes of frequent clashes where butchered combatants are found lying in pools of gore. And they're averaging like 2 of these attacks a day. Thank you, George Soros, for this. Now, a little bit of good news. The globalist grip on Europe is showing signs of weakening. Both Angela Merkel and Macron are tanking in the polls. And basically, they're seeing nationalism and patriotism and conservatism growing across the European Union. The backlash has begun. Pendulum always swings back and forth, back and forth. The liberals push that pendulum as far as they could. But now it's coming back. Now, David Garcia, he's a leading Arizona Democrat, and he's an ally to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and he was out there talking to progressive activists and said, just imagine a borderless USA. Just imagine no wall. And you have to look at the damage that's already been caused here and in Europe to understand why there needs to be a wall. Now, Garcia is supported by the socialist left and has even won support from billionaire hedge fund manager Tom Steyer. In June, Garcia held a fundraiser at Steyer's mansion in San Francisco, California. And Steyer, one of the billionaires of the socialist left, has funded similar anti-Trump, pro-open borders groups as billionaire George Soros. So they're out there pushing this thing. They're messing about with our planet. And you know something? I reject the idea that because somebody's a billionaire, that they have any kind of control over our lives. That's not the way it's supposed to be. These people are not elected. We did not give our consent to them to just mess around with our country like this. All right, so let's get into the situation with Alex Jones here, because Facebook has removed Alex Jones' pages for hate and bullying. They're suspending Jones' account for 30 days, supposedly for posting content that broke its rules. And again, this article here that came out of Web News says, has its own spin. They describe Alex Jones as a right-wing conspiracy theorist. At least they didn't call him a conspiracy nut. Apple removes most of Alex Jones' podcasts from iTunes. Just erased them. And this is being reported by BuzzFeed. And this move by Apple is the most sweeping of recent crackdowns on Jones' program by Facebook and other online sites that have suspended or removed some of his conspiracy-driven content. Only one program provided by InfoWars, Real News with David Knight, remained on Apple's platforms on Sunday. And an Apple spokesman was not available for comment early on Monday. So this is it. This is the war. They're starting the war. Article out of LouRockwell.com. The deep state intends to destroy Alex Jones. Don't let them. And they're using these fabricated, unwarranted lawsuits are being used to shut down Alex Jones, who raises too many issues that those who rule us do not want raised. Even this article says at times Alex can be over the top, but overall he has spread a lot of awareness of events that otherwise would have received no notice. That is certainly true. So they definitely want him shut down, and then they'll be after others. They'll be going after the rest of us. That's just the hard reality. They don't want open discussion. They don't want the American people to decide for themselves or think for themselves. They want to go back to that wonderful time of the Cold War where the government would tell the media what lies to tell you, and you would just sit there and believe them because you were innocent, naive, and trusting. Now, there may be a bit of a blowback. Apparently, Charles Feen, layman, reporting for the Washington Free Beacon, says a new policy paper making the rounds in Congress and tech circles could signal the future of regulating big tech. And this is described as a rude awakening for Facebook and Google. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Representative Darrell Issa is out there saying that if Twitter and Facebook are going to politic through algorithms, then it's time for them to be regulated by the Federal Elections Commission. That, and along with the fact that they're losing money. Over in Great Britain, Theresa May is launching what she's calling the fusion doctrine. It's being described as a new era of dictatorial power. And basically, Theresa May has instructed the intelligence services to use social media to disrupt misinformation, and says she will use every capability at our disposal to defeat the new threat facing Britain, which is the truth getting on out there about what immigration has done. And Mrs. May revealed that a major new effort will ensure every government agency and department views national security as their priority, rather than just police and security services. And this plan, dubbed the Fusion Doctrine, aims to tackle the evolving threats posed by cyber warfare and so-called fake news. So, yeah, this is it. This is the big fight. And yes, like that caller, years ago, I knew we would reach this point. Now, interestingly enough, apparently sales figures for tablets have slumped by more than 13% since last year. And apparently the allure of the tablet is wearing off, and people are going back to laptops with real keyboards. And I can understand why. I mean, the tablet is convenient to have, but not for that kind of money. I mean, we got for free with our AT&T renewal, but I wouldn't have bought one for myself. I did buy one for Claire, but I didn't need one. Now, apparently there is a new flaw that's been discovered in Drupal sites. It's called Symfony, and it affects Drupal 8 versions before version 8.5.6. So more cybercrime out there. Over in Bangladesh, they're having protests. The students are saying they wanted a peaceful protest, but the police have opened up on them with rubber bullets and tear gas. And the protests are really actually over road safety, and they've turned more violent with the deaths of 2 students as police used tear gas to break up the demonstration in Dhaka. And activists are saying 4 people have been injured. So it looks like the police are accelerating this. And so Bangladesh authorities have shut down all mobile internet access across the country, trying to basically contain the violence and what they describe as misinformation online. You know, turn off the Wi-Fi, keep them dumb and stupid. We can control them better that way. Over in Phoenix, they had a major, major dust storm. A lot of people were describing it as biblical. Others were saying it was almost like we were going back to the days of the Dust Bowl, which was caused by chronic land mismanagement. And I remember when I was a kid in school, we saw a film from the U.S. government about how the Dust Bowl was terrible, and the U.S. government was making sure it would never happen again. And here we have it happening again. Over in Lynchburg, Virginia, they had a close call. They had heavy, heavy rains that caused the Lynchburg Dam to overtop. Water was flowing over the top as well as down through the spillway. Fortunately, the Lynchburg Dam is concrete and not dirt. And there was a concern that if the dam did collapse, the city of Lynchburg would be under 17 feet of water in just 7 minutes. The rain has now backed off, the water has gone down, and officials are now allowing citizens of Lynchburg to return to their homes. So, good on that one here. This is kind of a weird story, and it appeared in CTV News up in Canada. Apparently, there was this major pileup, and one of the drivers who just got caught in the middle of it was actually billed for the firefighter response. And she said she never required or asked for firefighter assistance, but she got the bill for it anyway. Now, municipal fire departments in Alberta are able to bill the province for costs related to collisions on provincial highways. The government's insurance company can then turn to drivers involved in the collision to recoup the money. Although normally it's done through insurance companies rather by sending direct bills to the drivers themselves. And a lot of these drivers are saying, well, wait, you know, why are we paying taxes only to have bills sent to us? You know, one or the other. Over in Philadelphia, apparently there is a big upset over there that homes are being repossessed for as little as $300 in unpaid gas bills, because apparently the public gas company has started using an automated system to issue liens against the home. And there is zero due process, and if there is a system or administrative error, it doesn't really matter. Your home gets repossessed. There's even a concern that landlords could lose their rental properties if the person living in them misses the gas payments. So a whole bunch of the landlords got together and sued the city in federal court, but they lost. So the rise of the corporate interests here. All right, you're going to love this story. Okay. Over in Great Britain, no, I'm sorry, this is right here in the United States. The National Institutes of Health is spending $1.1 million to create a hookup app for transgender women and gay black men. And a lot of people are saying, why? You know, why is this being done here? Because, I mean, this is being supported by taxpayer money. And clearly it's a pork barrel project. If there was an actual demand for this, the private sector could provide it. But the NIH just said, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to have this app for transgender women and gay black men. Now, turning to education, apparently over in Charlotte, North Carolina, they decided they were going to retest their teachers, which they do periodically for their state license to be a teacher. And apparently in this last round, literally thousands of elementary school teachers failed portions of their state licensing exams. Now, of course, they're putting the blame on the exams. So the exams are too hard. You know, it's not the teacher's fault here. But in North Carolina, almost 2,400 elementary school teachers have failed the math portion of their licensing exams over the past 5 years. And the failures have increased since the state hired Pearson Publishing Company in 2013 to give the exam, according to a report given to the State Board of Education. Now, failure rates are going up at a time when schools across North Carolina are struggling to find teachers for the youngest students. And Pearson Publishing, for those who don't remember, is very much caught up in the Common Core curriculum. They're right on the heart of that. All right, so let's talk about some science and health news. And as we mentioned before, Hawaii's Volcano Village want their visitors back. They have taken a 90% hit in tourism revenue, and the city is very dependent on tourism. They got art galleries, they got restaurants. It's really a very nice place to visit, and they're trying to get people to come on back. And it's going to be hard. There's a lot of road damage that has to be repaired. Interesting video surfaced last week where they were using a helicopter to rescue a cow, get it out of the way of the lava. Now, the good news is, and yesterday I was looking at the tilt meter data and I saw it had flattened out. And I turned to Claire and I said, I think this may be over. And so today we get a report from the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory that earthquakes have reduced at Kilauea Summit and the lava flow from Fissure 8 has basically stopped. There's no movement in the channel. Now, they're still warning people that they need to stay away from there. The lava is still very hot. It's got a very thin crust. If you walk in the wrong place, you can disappear. But it looks like this eruption may finally be coming to an end, and this is the longest one in state's recorded history. Now, of course, toward the end of this week, we're going to have Hurricane Hector coming across the Big Island. Now, the eye will be out to sea, but the lava field is going to be close enough where it's going to get a good drenching. And that means there's going to be a lot of steam and a lot of lays and a lot of hissing. Now, here on Oahu, we actually have some raging brush fires out on the leeward side, which is way out that way. And they're not close to Claire and I, but we can see the smoke in the distance. And 2 elementary schools in West Oahu have been closed for safety. just to make sure that the students are not around there. And of course, getting on back to Hurricane Hector, it's now a Cat 4 hurricane. The predicted track is still to the south of the Hawaiian Islands. And so it's probably going to be here about Thursday. And it's a pretty big storm. We're going to be on the edge of it, which means we'll get some rain, we'll get some wind. Hopefully we won't lose our electricity. We'll be able to do our show as normal, but you never can tell here. But barring a sudden change in direction, it looks like we dodged a bullet. There is, however, another tropical depression forming right behind it. So we're kind of like in a shooting gallery. There's an additional 2 tropical storms moving up the coast of Mexico. So this is going to be a wild and crazy season. Apparently, 2 powerful earthquakes hit the Indonesian resort islands of Bali and Lombok. At least 91 people are dead. Hundreds of people have been taken to the local hospitals. Thousands of homes have been damaged. So the planet really is rocking and rolling. There was an interesting article that came out the other day saying that there is statistical evidence that a large earthquake on one side of the planet can actually trigger an earthquake at the exact opposite point, which makes sense because the seismic waves would fan out, fan around the globe, and then reconcentrate at that opposite point. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, down in Florida, they were having a back-to-school event at Titusville Park, and apparently somebody who was there got into a fist fight with another parent and left, and then came on back with a gun, basically returned to the park and began firing. Now, a bystander licensed to carry a firearm then shot the shooter, who was wounded and evacuated to a nearby hospital, apparently in critical condition. But it's another reminder, the only way you can stop a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. This could have turned into another mass shooting involving children, and oh my goodness, the gun grabbers would have had a field day with that. By the way, did you know that the largest mass shooting in American history is the Wounded Knee Massacre, where literally hundreds of Lakota were slaughtered by the United States government? All right. Now, this one is very unpleasant. There was this 20-year-old man with Down syndrome, and he was shot and killed by police this week as he walked down the street with a toy gun. Now, if you look at a photo of this guy, you can tell this is a Down's child. And the mother is saying he had the mentality of a 3-year-old. And police are claiming that the young man created a threat that needed to be dealt with deadly force. And so 3 police officers shot him in his stomach for walking down the street with a plastic toy gun. It's not very good here. All right. Meanwhile, up in Chicago, Chicagoans are getting very angry at what they're describing as con man Mayor Emanuel. There was a record shooting spree over this last week. 77 people were shot last week in Chicago, 9 fatally. And every time I see the story come on out, the numbers keep going on up. But the shootings accelerated aggressively. 30 shot in 3 hours. Just 3 hours. Boy, thank goodness Chicago has such strict gun laws. It would really be out of control there, wouldn't it, here? Over at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, they have upheld this bill, this California bill, that requires new semi-automatic handguns to automatically imprint bullet casings with identifying information, including the make and model of the gun, the serial number of the gun, various other information. And they're upholding this bill even though the technology doesn't exist. And the requirement of this law is this information has to be stamped on 2 different parts of the brass casing. And as a result of the new law, some gun companies are just pulling out of California, like Ruger and Smith & Wesson. And gun rights advocates are slamming the law, saying, this is ridiculous. They're demanding that we have something that doesn't exist yet. Yeah, politicians here. Over in Great Britain, the British government is going for a policy called presumed consent, where everybody by default will be considered an organ donor unless they specifically opt out. And conservative government ministers are to go ahead with this reforming the organ donation laws, which they say will increase the availability of organs for transplant by 700 per year. And Wales is already operating such a system. Scotland is looking into a similar scheme, and Northern Ireland is also considering it. And being an organ donor is actually kind of a cool thing to be. Now, here in Hawaii, when you get your driver's license, they have a little checkbox on the back where you basically say, yes, I'm an organ donor. So if they find you dead in the road, they call the ambulance and take you off. Apparently, Lyme disease has now come back to all 50 states, and Florida and California used to be considered low risk. Now, all of a sudden, they're hot spots for this tick-borne illness. Rates are soaring nationwide. Gee, I wonder who walked across the border carrying this Lyme disease and so many others. It's just another way in which this open border situation is causing harm to the American people. And I look at some of these liberals, and it's almost like they're totally disconnected from reality. Or they just don't care. They just want what they want, and they're oblivious to the harm they're actually causing. And that's not wise leadership. Anyway, we're going to take another break for commercials here. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is now actually covering the problem with older Americans increasingly being driven into bankruptcy. And they're talking about loss of pensions, retiree benefits, shrinking safety net. But our leaders want to give illegal immigrants sneaking into our country a payment. Give them stuff. Get them in here. Get them voting Democratic. It sometimes feels like this country is literally tearing itself apart. You look around at what's going on between the violence and the bizarre behavior, and it just feels like our society is coming apart. Anyway, getting on back to the science and medicine here. Millions of people battling addiction to prescription drugs in hidden crisis. This is over in Great Britain. And we have the same problem here, where doctors are being incentivized to write prescriptions for addictive pain medications. And then the people get on the medications and they can't get off. Permanent cash flow to the pharmaceutical industry. That's really what it's all about. It's getting hard to see a moral, ethical difference between the pharmaceutical corporations and the dealer down on the street corner. Now, last week, there was this meteor that came down in Greenland. And the Air Force was still very silent about it. They've updated the information. Apparently, the meteor did not actually hit the Earth. It exploded about 25 miles up. It would have been visible and certainly audible to the people at the Air Force Base. So a lot of people are wondering if it was, in fact, a botched weapons test here. All right, let's see. We're going to go to the phones. Beth in Florida. Aloha, Beth. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to make a quick call. I heard you before the break mention about, ticking that box off on your driver's license to be a donor or donating your organs.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify one thing. When you do that, when you donate your organs, you have to be alive in order for them to make use of your organs. And there are people who have been...
No, I don't think that's...
Not quite dead.
No, I mean, basically, where most organ donors come from are like motorcycle accidents, because the brain will be destroyed, but the heart is still beating. So I guess technically in that sense, they would still be alive. But there are some parts of the body where you don't have to have that, like if they're transplanting tendons or things like that. In any event, the reality is for myself, I'm above the age where they take organ donations.
Okay, yeah, I know RBN, on not your show, but on other people's shows, they've had people and doctors who have come in and said, you know, a lot of people don't know that you know, if they take your liver or your kidneys or whatever, you have to actually be alive. They put you in a frozen state, but they've done it to people who have not been brain dead. And I think Deanna Spingola or someone had it's been a while, maybe a couple of years ago, that this doctor came on and said, you know, a lot of people wouldn't tick off that box on their driver's license if they actually knew the truth of the matter.
Well, you know, I was trying to do the right thing here, but again, for me personally, you know, it's no longer a worry because I'm too old. I'm already worn out. Nobody wants my organs. But again, I think we're in a gray area where, you know, they're trying to make it sound like the old Monty Python sketch where these two guys come on in and just start chopping organs out of a guy who's sitting in his living room. I think there has to be some expectation that the patient's not going to survive. And at that point, whatever mechanical methods are used to preserve, you know, the organs, you know, it makes sense. They're going to put them in ice for transport. They're going to get the airplane ready. And so it is a touchy issue, and I know a lot of people are bothered by it.
Yeah, there was, I can't remember her name now, but there was a woman whose son was, he actually came to in the ambulance, and they put him back out again because they wanted, I guess he was the right blood type or whatever, and they wanted his organs, and his mother put up a big fight trying to, you know, inform everybody of just the danger. You know, I'm older than you are.
That sounds like the storyline from the movie Coma, and I can't imagine that the ambulance attendants. I got to tell you, I'm having trouble with that story. You know, the ambulance attendants probably would not be involved in something like that for the simple reason that they're not paid well enough to do that, and they might blab. So I got to tell you that particular story does not pass the smell test. It is the storyline from the movie Coma.
I'll have to dig through the archives then and find that doctor. Okay, that's all I've got for you, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, a long time. Nice talking with you. Yeah, Mike, I want to talk about what's going on with CNN, talking about this guy Manafort and all the money he has, but they don't talk about what's going on in Chicago, 66 shootings over the weekend, 12, 14 murdered. I mean, every weekend it seems like Chicago is like it's worse than the Middle East. And all you hear about is Manafort, Russian collusion, boo, 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 all this other nonsense to try to take Trump down. But here in the meantime, the country is being annihilated with these leftist cities. We got San Francisco, we got Chicago, 66 shootings over the weekend, Michael. That's unbelievable. That's worse than Vietnam. And I mean, this is a war zone. And, you know, you think about what's going on. Look, I just came back from Cuba. I can tell you all about Cuba. If you ever want to get educated, I'll tell you all about it. I can tell you in Cuba, they don't have no crime as far as that kind of nonsense because they'll take you against the wall in 3 days and they'll shoot you. Well, they'll put 4 guys over there. One will have a 22 bullet, line you up against a wall. In every city, they have a wall, and they'll line you up, turn you around, put a blindfold, and shoot you in the head. They don't have crime in Cuba, believe me. Yep. Especially capital crime. They may have a little petty theft crime, and people when they steal a chicken or something or a cow or a pig, you know what they do? They'll take the machete out and they'll cut the person's arm off. And there's a lot of them guys running around Cuba with no arms. Okay, so now I'll give you a little synopsis of what's going on in Cuba. But getting back to the United States, what's going on here in our cities like Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and all, in this Black Lives Matter nonsense. This is all insanity. And, you look what's going on in the left coast of San Francisco and California. That place is destroyed.
Yes.
Fires everywhere. The place is destroyed. You know what? All these media creeps keep talking about is Trump, Russia collusion, Paul Manafort, he's guilty, he's this, Manafort's that, Manafort's a criminal. Hey, the guy made money, so what? Come on. This is all nonsense here. It is all run by a bunch of socialist communists, which is George Soros funded. You got all these leftist pigs in this country, and all these college kids are getting brainwashed, and they're going fighting their own people, Antifa and all that. What kind of nonsense is this? Just this media, this is like Goldfinger out of a James Bond movie. Back in the 60s when Sean Connery made Goldfinger. This is exactly what the hell is going on. It's insanity. It's unbelievable. And I'll tell you, Michael, I just got back from Cuba a couple weeks back, and I can tell you, yeah, they have their problems. And he didn't get, there was not a revolution. There was a revolution. The place was in rubble. Okay? When you go to the resort cities, it's okay. I'm not going to lie to you. It's beautiful. But you got on the country outside, man, it looks like something time stood still. You're back in 1959. I can guarantee you that.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, but there's no crime over there as far as major crime. You don't hear about it. And if there's an accident over there, well, they just scoop you up, throw you in a box, and that's it. I mean, the dogs run over here. Every city you go to, Michael, the dogs are running free by the thousands. They don't have animal control. They don't have weed eaters over there, Michael.
Okay.
Goats eating all the grass.
Okay, Tom.
But it's a beautiful place.
Tom, we're running out of time, and I don't need any more about Cuba here. But getting on back to the liberal bastions in this country, places like Chicago, Baltimore, every place that's under liberal control, it's being turned into a welfare state. And they're trying to get people dependent on the government so they'll keep voting for the government. It's real bread and circuses stuff. And you need to understand that Nazi Germany was a welfare state, and so was Stalinist Russia. They got everybody, basically forced them to be dependent on the government to keep them obedient, and that's what the liberal agenda is trying to do here. And for people who are not going along with that, then they have that Antifa group that's out there just beating and clubbing people.
Yeah, it's horrible. These leftists are licking from the lollipop, Michael, and it's got to stop. And Trump, I'll tell you what, Trump ought to send the military. He ought to send the National Guard in Chicago. He really should. He should send the Guard in there, let them straighten out, put that Rahm Emanuel on notice. Hey, guess what? The Guard's coming in here. We're going to straighten this nightmare out once for all.
Well, it's a case of what is he going to do? I mean, Chicagoans want Trump to come on in. They reached the point where it's obvious Rahm Emanuel can't do anything or won't do anything about it. But what's the National Guard or the military going to do? Come on in and just start house-to-house searches and gun confiscation?
Well, Michael, I'll tell you, here in South Florida, in the Miami area, Fort Lauderdale areas, you got a big crack epidemic. I mean, you got girls out there 19, 20, 25 years old. They're on crack. I mean, you see hundreds of them. It's like, what's going on here? There's crack hoes everywhere. It's like, it's insanity what's going on in our cities. Insanity. Talk about the drug issue, Michael. Just come pouring over the border. All these girls are on smoking crack, and it's crazy what's happened. You didn't hear about this in the 60s or 70s, not even really in the 80s. This didn't really start happening until the 90s. You didn't see all these people smoking crack and guns pouring in our country like madness in the 70s and 80s. No, there's some kind of I don't know if it's that Soros or who's behind this, Goldfinger, but there's something crazy going on. And I mean every city in our country, actually.
We know that a lot of the drug trafficking in this country is tied up with intelligence agencies. The CIA has been using illicit substances as a source of revenue not subject to congressional review going all the way back to Vietnam, when they were using the body bags of our dead kids to smuggle opium back to the United States. And it transshipped through right here on Oahu because they couldn't fly the entire Pacific in one jump. And it corrupted our local politics as well. And the effects were felt for years afterwards.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's amazing that Trump hasn't got the money for the border wall, Michael. I don't know what's going to happen with this election, but I mean, they won't even fund, the rhinos won't even help the guy get funding for a wall that needs to be built immediately to stop this insanity. It's crazy.
It is. It's just unbelievably insane. And
well, my brother called me, and yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Kidnappings in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale is off the chain, Michael. The kidnappings over there. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, he told me on the news they had it where they found a house and they had 5 young males in there and they're kidnapped, and I don't know what they're doing to them, but I mean that's happening on the news over every day in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale. You're hearing on the news kidnappings, drugs coming in. I mean, goodness, I thought South Florida's bad. My gosh, place is nuts.
Yeah, it is.
You know, hopefully it gets resolved.
Well, yeah, I think the only way we're going to be able to resolve it is we're going to have to wait for the crash. Okay, the people that are in power right now, they like things exactly the way they are. It's giving them wealth or prestige or power, and they're not going to allow anything to change what it is that they're doing, whether it's the economy or the border issue or the opiate crisis. All of these things exist and are maintained by people who profit from them. So we're going to have to wait for the crash and then be ready to go with mobilizing ordinary American people to stand up and say, you know, we formed our own country once before and it worked out pretty good, and I think we're going to do that again. And just basically ban the professional political class from having any dialogue whatsoever in the discussion.
I totally agree, Michael. One more thing, Michael. CNN, are they ever going to tell the truth about anything? And what's going to happen with this Manafort and this Mueller investigation on Trump? What's your opinion on that? What's going to happen with this guy Manafort and all the spoils of money he's stole or whatever? What about Hillary? She's stealing left and right, and Bill. But here it's Trump and Manafort. What's your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, regarding CNN, I think if CNN ever told the truth, their logo would explode. As far as Manafort, apparently he's being he's being charged for tax evasion and possible money laundering. But his ace in the hole is Rod Rosenstein, because 8 years ago, Rod Rosenstein investigated Manafort for these exact same events and exonerated him. So what they're going to do, and looking at the media coverage, they're trying to make fun of him. They're trying to make him look unsympathetic. I forget how many times I've read about his ostrich jacket, which I will grant you is extraordinarily over the top. But, I mean, if they're making fun of his wardrobe, that's an attempt basically to kill sympathy for him. Anyway, Tom, we're going to let you go. We're getting close to the end of the program. And I've got a few more bits and pieces of news here. Article coming on out here from The Verge. Why NASA is struggling to get its most powerful space telescope off the ground. And they're talking about the James Webb Space Telescope, which is over budget. And first of all, you need to understand NASA's total budget is very small. NASA receives roughly half of 1% of the annual federal budget. The American people are spending more on pizza than they do on spaceflight. So they want to get this James Webb Space Telescope up there. And they're having to be very careful, because if you look at the design of this, it is probably one of the most complex self-assembling structures to ever be put into space. And where it's going to be put, it will be unreachable. Even if we still had a space shuttle program, it wouldn't be able to get to the James Webb Space Telescope in order to repair it. And I'm sure a lot of people working on this are remembering the embarrassment over the Hubble Space Telescope, but they were able to get up there and repair that using the space shuttle. Not this time. It's got to work right on the very first attempt, which is, you know, all the solar panels deploy, everything unfolds correctly. Even the main mirror, the main optical mirror, is in pieces and has to assemble. So I think NASA is justified in taking time and spending the money to make sure this will work properly. And as I said before, NASA's budget is just tiny compared to the rest of the government. I mean, look at the cost of the F-35, for example. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting on back to NASA, NASA has now announced on Friday the 9 men and women who will be the first crews for the commercial spaceships being built by Boeing and SpaceX, which are expected to launch to the International Space Station beginning next year. And these missions will mark the first crewed launches from U.S. soil since the end of the Space Shuttle program 7 years ago. So finally, we're getting back into space here. Now, Google is apparently funding a campaign group that spams policymakers and newspapers in an attempt to influence key decisions that affect the tech giant. And the group is called Open Media. It encourages members of the public to sway the opinion of influential politicians and media figures by sending them automated messages. But the site is being used to amplify the extent of public support for policies that benefit Silicon Valley, an investigation by the Times suggests. Its tools, which include one-click links to automate tweet and email key policy figures, were recently used to send a barrage of messages to members of the European Parliament, pushing them to reject a proposal for tighter EU copyright laws. So apparently Facebook and Google led the lobbying campaign to get that defeated. I'm glad they were. Now, here's another one. Facebook wants to cash in on the £11 billion Lonely Hearts industry. They're launching a dating app that allows users to choose from 5 different genders. I don't know, why don't they just use a slider? You know, just somewhere in there. Talk about our technology getting decadent, along with our society as a whole, which is really where it is. Anyway, Mike Adams has issued an official statement on the censorship of Alex Jones, and he's saying, it's time to arrest these tech giant executives for criminal racketeering and fraud. He says RICO clearly applies here because there is a conspiracy to silence America. He may be on to something, but I'm hoping that the jury will side with Alex Jones on this. Because if you can be sued for defamation by somebody who doesn't like what you're saying, that's not just a threat to the independent media, it's a threat to all media. Even if you ignore that double standard of this New York Times lady screaming about white men are bad on Twitter and it being allowed to stand, at the same time they're trying to silence Alex Jones. But these are definitely dark times. We're definitely being shoved into a globalist dictatorship. And it may falter. It may stumble. Now they're back to saying that Brexit is going to be a no-deal Brexit. They can't reach an agreement. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Please help out everybody in the independent media. They need your support against basically this attack to keep us all silenced. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.